Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. My name's Steve. I am here with the xTool S1. We're going to be checking this one out and testing out. And instead of doing a full-on review where I just fly through a bunch of different things, I figured let's do a video on getting started with your xTool S1. There's a lot of people who this might be your first laser, or maybe it's your first xTool and you're trying to figure out XCS. So I thought, let me walk you through setting up the laser and then getting into XCS and how you can start cutting, engraving, and working with photos. So we're going to kind of walk through that, and along the way I will tell you some of the ins and outs and features of this laser. So hopefully you can get a good idea about the laser if you're looking into it, or if you've already bought it, it'll help get you started with working it. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. xTool is known for their excellent packaging, and so as we open up the box, you're going to notice that it is well packaged in foam, and they also included these nice Velcro straps to pull the machine out. So it is possible to do it with one person, but if you need a little help, go ahead and do that. And then we're just going to go ahead and get it out of the bag and start kind of removing all of the protective plastic and stickers that are on the outside. So one of the first things that we need to do to get this thing going is way at the back on each side of the gantry there is a little block that is put in place to keep everything from moving around in transit. So there's two screws in there that this Allen head screwdriver will remove. You want to take those out and then remove this sticker on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and we'll move on. All right, once we have those out of the way, we can come grab the gantry and we can pull it forward. You never want to do this too quickly. You just want to kind of bring it out slowly. Looks like we need to remove this, so you're probably going to want to get yourself some side cutters to do that safely, or you can maybe take your box cutter and just very carefully pop them out. And now we can start connecting our module. So we have the power and data cord for the module, and we have our air assist inlet. So those hook up on the side. The air assist just pushes on so it fully seats onto those barbs. And then this is keyed, so you can only put it in one way. The tab is going to go towards the back. So we want to push that in until it clips in place. And then on the back, we have this little keyhole here. This needs to kind of pop in there, and then that will push down, and then a couple screws should go into the top here. And next we want to take our autofocus tool, and it's just going to magnetically clip onto the side here. Just get that where, there, it locks in. You'll feel it kind of grab, and then it's not going to slide around after that. That just comes off, and you'll see in here we have basically like a 4-inch fan. It's a brushless fan. This is something that you'll want to check on and clean every so often. But we can basically just insert this, and it looks like it can go either direction. So that's just going to sit in there, and we are going to use the same screws and get it hooked up and put back in place. So a few of the standard connections, you have this little USB key that can be used as a lockout. We have our power adapter, and then we have our USB-C cable that will go from the laser to your computer. So if you just picked up the base model laser with none of the extra accessories, you're about ready to start using it. So if you're just doing engraving operations, you could work just off the base crumb tray here. You have maybe about 3 inches of working area that it can work with without removing anything here or using the base. But if you are cutting, you will want to elevate the surface, and that's where these kind of triangular shaped rails come in. There's no real place to jig them in, but you would just set them down here in the work surface and create a bit of a support structure where you could then set your piece on. You only want to use as many as you need because the more that are in there, the more touch points it'll have as far as flashback on the backside. But these will basically just sit in the base there, elevate your workspace, allow a little airflow underneath for smoke and debris to be extracted and not stay in the back of the material. However, we are going to move on. We're going to add the riser base to this and also check out that honeycomb attachment. So let me get that assembled and we'll take a look at it when it's complete. All right, so the optional riser base, we're going to go ahead and unbox this. You'll want to kind of lay out your parts. We got the two larger side rails first, and we got our front and back panels. Now these do have a flip down section to it, so just get those oriented right. You want to get those kind of pushed in place, and then you're going to take some screws and attach those in the corners to start. With that done, you want to bring your laser back over and get it ready, because one of our next steps is we are going to then remove the crumb tray, remove all the screws. There's 3 on each side and a couple up front, and then that should pop out easily. Then we can place the laser on top of the riser base, making sure it lines up. You'll kind of feel it lock in place, and then you'll line it up. There are some screws that used to hold the crumb tray in that will attach to the panel. Now here we're using some of the included foam strips. That just kind of helps create a light seal, and then we can put our crumb tray back in. Now we've also got the optional honeycomb panel. I do recommend this, especially if you're going to be cutting a lot of smaller parts. It's just one unit. It does have rubber feet on the bottom, so those are going to go down. You're just going to go ahead and place those down into the crumb tray. Now the final accessory we have is the optional smart air assist. So you got to hook up our air hose as well as the communications cable. Nice, so I've had the S1 put together for a little while. We've used it, and I've moved it over to the bench here, piped it into my air exhaust system. So I'm no longer using the included vent. I'm actually using an adapter into a 4-inch, so I can easily pipe it into my 4-inch ducting here. Other than that, we're still using this fairly stock. And I've gotten used to it a little bit. So what I want to do is walk you through a few different tests and a few examples of what this machine can do. And while we do that, we'll highlight some of its features. So I do like that a lot of manufacturers, including xTool, are moving to an all-enclosed design. It adds to the safety features and helps people kind of get started without that extra burden of, now you're running outside, you're building an enclosure. As is, without the base, this comes fairly well sealed and ready to go. They have an exhaust fan in the back along with a pipe so that you can vent it out. As I mentioned, I've added into my custom exhaust setup here, but if you don't, you can take that pipe and just vent it out a window, or you can try one of the various fume extractors out there. Just know that when you use those, there are filters that are very consumable, and you're going to be running through those quite rapidly. So anytime that you can with any laser, it's best to be able to vent it outside whenever possible. Now the xTool S1 has this nice big acrylic shroud on the top here. It does wrap down, which gives you a lot of visibility into the laser. And it's important to protect your eyes while also having that visibility so you can kind of monitor it, so you can see what's going on in there. In case things aren't running right, you can stop it and reset. Speaking of that, over on the side here, you see in the back, we do have this big red button. It's a nice emergency stop button. It's a safety feature that I think should be on all lasers. It's great to see xTool incorporated into this one. So you'll just hit that on the side. That'll kill all motion. It'll kill power to the laser. Unfortunately, you're going to lose your work at that point, but that is a case where you need to stop motion. You need to stop what it's doing. So it's great to have that safety feature. My only complaint about it is kind of way back here on the side. In an emergency, you want it really readily accessible. A lot of places, they'll be on kind of the front of the machine, somewhere easily hit, but it is there. It does stick out a bit, so it's not too hard to find. And if you ever do trip it, you just need to twist it to reactivate the laser, and that will release the emergency stop on there. In addition to that, you will notice that there are multiple sensors in the back as well as the front. There are about 5 different sensors here for flame detection. And so that if it sees an abnormal amount of flame and light coming from the laser, it's going to trigger a flame alarm. Now, in odd areas, you may get some ambient light that can trigger that. So they do allow you to adjust that or completely turn it off within the system. But it is going to be proactive in helping detect any problems and shut the machine down at the time and throw an error. So be mindful of that. It will It will be a feature that can help, but in some scenarios with some material, you might get some extra flare-ups that could trigger it as well. Speaking of the inside here, they do have LED lights on the front and the back, which is really nice. It helps light things up fairly well. I feel that that's pretty adequate. Some people might find that they want to add extras, but in my use of it so far, between this and the shop lights, things are fairly well lit. Now I've brought you in a little bit closer to see a few of the features about the gantry and such. One nice thing that we're seeing on this laser and other high-end lasers like this is we're seeing some very nice cable management. They've got everything in cable chain. It's run nicely along both the X and the Y gantries over here on the side that you can't see it, but they do maintain those cables, keep them out of the way, and keep them protected. The laser itself has some features on it. So there's this little magnetic measuring probe, and so that will pop off out of the way if it does happen to hit anything, but it has a little plate over on the side that will reset it, and that can go down and probe the depth to get fairly accurate measurements. I've actually come to like that pretty well in the fact that it's a little more precise than some of the optical ones that I've seen, and it can do multiple probing for curved surfaces and such, as well as the combination of that and the crosshair laser make for a fairly nice positioning tool when using XCS. Now the module itself is technically modular. They do make a 10 and a 20 watt module for this. So this is the 40 watt, so the highest blue diode one they have for it right now. And they also have a 2 watt IR. So as you saw in the installation, these two screws hold it on top, and then there's kind of some keyways that will slide onto there. And then this whole thing is Z addressable, so it will move up and down when powered off or addressable through the stepper motor in here. So a nice thing there is that it can do that manual operation for, well, automatic operation for focusing, as well as you can play around with adjusting the height in the software, both in XCS and Lightburn, to be able to adjust the depth of your cut. So that can be nice. If you're cutting thicker material, you can actually tell it, probe off the top to get the thickness, but then drop down, say, 2 or 3 millimeters. Now in Lightburn, you can do that by layer, say in each pass, go down X number of millimeters. So some slight differences between the softwares, but the fact that this is a Z addressable laser gives you that flexibility. Now some of the optional features I have on here, you saw we assembled the riser base, and with that you end up unbolting the crumb tray from the inside here, and we've also added the honeycomb panel. I prefer working with honeycomb panels. The blades are okay. The problem I see in this one is that they're just kind of set in that tray, and so they're kind of loose, and it makes it a little more difficult for setting up jigs and such like that. So if you do have this laser and you have the riser base, I'd strongly recommend either getting the xTool panel or something similar to that. Maybe if you just need a smaller one for smaller objects, you can get that, but it's always nice getting the gear that's meant for the laser. The honeycomb panel and or the blades are there to lift the material up off a flat surface, and you want airflow going underneath them. So the stock honeycomb panel does have rubber feet, creates a little over an 1/8 inch gap there that allows air to move underneath there. And what that does is it lets the light beam come all the way through and lets those gases and smoke and debris go through and not just sit underneath your material then staining it. It moves down through the honeycomb or through those slats and then can move out and off to the exhaust. So that will discolor this over time. That's okay. You do want to keep an eye on that. It cleans up. This is just kind of residue from the sap and the glues and the wood. It gets vaporized. Then it readheres to whatever's underneath it, and this is why you want your material elevated. You can easily clean this off. I like to use either Dawn Power Wash dish soap kind of stuff or LA Awesome. I don't use anything that's too caustic, and I don't use anything that's too you can power wash this, but you want to be careful not using too high of a setting. You want this to remain flat and level, and you don't want to inadvertently bend anything in here. So I usually just spray it down, let it sit for a little bit, maybe give it a little bit of scrubbing, maybe get yourself some pipe cleaners if you have a few of these honeycomb cells that are extra gunked up. Then either blow dry it off or leave it out in the sun. Just make sure it dries off before putting it back in here. Another optional accessory that I have that I honestly don't feel it should be optional, this should be just coming with the laser, is the Smart Air Assist. Now this one has a few dial settings on here. It has a USB style connector to go from the pump to the laser, as well as it has the air outlet going into the laser. And as we showed in the build video, those plug into the back, and then that allows the laser to power, control, and move the air. Now you have your option of having this on auto, or you can manually select your airflow options. Now if you're using XCS, you want to just drop this on auto, leave it, and in there you can set your airflow rates for both cutting and engraving, as well as scoring. If you're using Lightburn, you can tell it to turn on and off, but it won't be able to tell it to control what speed. Personally, I like to run full air when cutting, but when engraving, I like to have some air. Helps keep the smoke and debris away from the lens. It also helps keep things clear from your engraving, but sometimes having too much blows that smoke and debris and any vaporized material across the unengraved area, causing a little more cleanup. So that's where being able to dial it back a little bit can be nice. It's completely up to you how you work out your workflow, your preference of how your material looks. I always recommend running air, even when engraving though, because you want to keep that smoke and debris away from your material and away from your lens, because it'll dirty both of them up. So the nice thing on this one, it does have some rubber feet that keep it from vibrating too loudly. And then on the bottom, we also have an inlet air filter. You do want to try to keep this in a clean air environment as possible, because as you get particulate coming in here, you don't want it blowing through into the lens. So this captures that, and then this can get clogged up over time. They do provide you with a couple of extras, and then you can obviously buy extras as well. So nice thing about this is if you're running XCS, like I say, put it on auto, plug everything in, I tuck it behind the laser, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and it runs very quiet. Now there are a couple more accessories you can get for the xTool S1 that I don't have. They do have their fire suppression system, which uses CO2 cartridges, plugs into the back, and then it kind of ties in with those sensors that if it does sense that there's a fire going on, it will stop the laser and it will actually flood the compartment with CO2. I have not tested that out, or I have not used it. I personally always monitor my lasers. If I ever have a problem, I would open up the lid, which is also going to trigger another safety feature in that it'll stop the laser from moving. Hit it with maybe a little spritzer of water, or if it's gotten that bad, I have other fire extinguishers to help put this out. If you're monitoring it proactively, you should be able to catch things before they become a problem, and therefore I don't have the fire suppression system. Now, if you want it for peace of mind, by all means, hook it up to the machine and use it. Don't be complacent and trust on that it's going to cause or take care of any problems. Always be monitoring your laser and keeping an eye on it. Another add-on to this, with the riser base, you can actually get a conveyor system that will allow you to feed material through this. Now that does mean you're going to lose some of your enclosed nature of this, as this flap would have to come down. You would attach the conveyor system in here and it would feed material in and out. So you'd also need to have space on the back side to be able to go out the back. That expands this to about a 3,000 millimeter length, along with the just under 500 millimeter width, to give you a very large engraving area with this machine. Just with the caveat that, it's going to be a little more open and you're going to have those expanded areas front and back, but definitely allows for a more open nature of this machine. Even without that conveyor though, if you're using the riser, you can open up the front and back, and you can actually put a larger piece in here, and you would have to kind of tile it if it was bigger than that, or if you're just trying to engrave on something smaller or something larger that doesn't fit in there, you could use this as a pass-through as well. So definitely adds to some of the flexibility of the machine. All right, we are over at the computer, and we are going to jump into xTool Creative Space 2.0. That recently just became officially launched for anyone to use. It's out of their beta testing phase. If you're used to the older versions of xTool Creative Space, this has some nice features you might want to look into. It adds multi-machine, multi-file working, so you can start a file, you can minimize that, you can open up and start working on a whole nother project. You can also connect to multiple machines, and you can be running multiple machines from your XCS interface. So there are other nice features such as node editing and other optimization settings, but I'm not going to go into that in here. But we are going to be using that tool to connect to the laser and run with it. All right, so we've got xTool Creative Space spun up here, and now I'm already connected to my laser, but to get yours connected, you're going to want to start out in USB mode. And when you open it up, it's going to want you to connect to a device. Now mine says it's already connected, but you can come up here and in your drop-down, you'll see Connect Device. Now, if it's plugged in via USB, you are on the USB tab, it's going to go out and look for any device list it sees connected that way. You just simply click here, and it's going to be connected that way. Now, if you want to connect via Wi-Fi, you're going to need to first connect via USB. Then you're going to come up, and once you're connected, and into this setting tab, here's where you can get into some of the updates and change some of the parameters. So what we want to do is scroll down here. You'll see check for updates. This is for your firmware. Always good to keep an eye on any firmware changes. If it's not broken, don't fix it, but they generally do release some feature updates, or maybe if things aren't working quite as they want, they'll push out an update to it. But for example, switching to xTool Creative Space 2.0, you needed to update the firmware to allow it to run multiple machines at once. So this is where you would do that. The program itself will actually check every time you open up for software updates as well as firmware updates, and so it's going to alert you anyway. But if you ever want to manually do it, you need to come in here. But Wi-Fi setting, this is where you could do it here. You're going to come into setting, and you're going to go ahead and find your Wi-Fi network that you are running off of, and then you're going to want to go ahead and put in the password, hit next, and it should then connect via Wi-Fi. It might take a little bit. The xTool Wi-Fi is pretty decent at connecting to most networks. I haven't had any problems on a 5 versus 2.4 or a mix. As well as having spaces in the name, things like that. But it should come up and say Wi-Fi configuration is complete, and now you can actually disconnect the USB cable and run it that way if you want. If you're ever doing firmware updates, I definitely recommend that you still plug it in via USB. It just kind of eliminates that possibility of a connection issue. But other than that, I actually haven't had any problems running any of my xTool machines via Wi-Fi. Now, once you have that set up and connected, we're here in Creative Space. We need to go over a couple of features to be able to position our material. Now, jumping over here to the laser view, you can see I have a piece of material in there, and our module is kind of parked up in the upper left. What we want to do is tell XCS both the thickness as well as the positioning of the material. So we can do that back here in XCS. We want to play around with a couple things. So first off, we're going to want to move our module over our material, because we're going to be starting out with checking the depth or the thickness of the material. Now, I like to bring it over into the middle. Hopefully you can see the crosshair there on camera. We just have it probing here, and you also want to make sure that your material is flat, that it's not rocking. Otherwise, that could get a miscalculation of the depth on there. So once we have that in position, we come back here into XCS, and we are up here in the distance tool. You want to just click on your crosshairs, and that will tell the laser to move over to the material. It'll touch the probe off of there, and then it's going to move over to its reset panel in the upper right. And then you'll see here in XCS, it has changed our distance from 0 to 41.93 millimeters. Now that's the distance from the laser module to the material. So you can't just put in, say, 3 millimeters, because that is 3 millimeters material. You need to know the distance. So if I drop that panel down lower into the next rail on the thing, it would actually add, another 8 or so millimeters to that distance. Once we have that, we can then go ahead and move into the start marking here. So I'm going to just jump right back into XCS here and show you the full screen. We're going to click this start marking button. This is going to bring up a window to be able to mark our processing area. So the step is you're going to check what type of item you're going to be doing. So if it's a rectangle, it's going to be doing a 2-point upper left, lower right. If it's a circle, it's going to be any 3 points on the outside of the circle. Polygon is going to be if you have just a weird shape and you need to just keep clicking different points till it brings it back. And then there's obviously just a straight line. So we're going to be going with rectangle, so we're going to click on that. That highlights our start marking area, and it's going to bring up this window. Again, we want to mark 2 points on the different horizontal lines to form a rectangle. So we're going to start in the upper left for point 1, and then we're going to go down to point 2. So we're going to bring back our view here so we can see both of them. What we need to do is, using our crosshairs, we're going to move those up into the upper left. We put them right in that corner, and you want to hit the button on the front of the machine here. That will record point 1. You'll see it light up there in XCS. Now we're going to bring this down to the lower right. And again, we're going to hit the button. And now you see in XCS that we have a full rectangle, roughly the shape of our material that's in the laser and also within the working area of it. Now, if we wanted to, we're going to hit end marking here, and that records that first shape. If we wanted to add another one, we could move the laser again, and we could add another box if we had another piece down here. But we're just working with the one, so we're going to go ahead and hit done. Now you see in our working area, we have our starting point and our stopping point, and the shape of the material marked into our working area. Now another thing I want to point out is you see here we have our crosshair. Now if I come back over to the laser and move it back over, you'll see that crosshair kind of follow it. So it's doing some real-time positioning of the laser head. What I like to do is just bring it up off of that top left corner, and that's kind of my parking spot where it's going to start and where it's going to return from the job. So you'll see that that crosshair moved up here. So now anything we put inside this box is going to be within that material. So if I put a box over in this upper left corner, it's going to mark a box there, cut a box there, and we'll know that it is in the exact position. So this is actually a very accurate method for laying out your work, and so far for me has worked pretty well. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and set up a test job using the array tool. We'll do both a cut test as well as an engrave test, and we'll check those out when it's done. All right, so we've set up our working area with the thickness of our material. Now we need to figure out what do we do with our project. And so you can start by just adding text and shapes, and the nice thing is that xTool does have some presets that you can play around with. So up here in our material tab, we could actually come down here and look through the various items and try to find something close to what we're working with. Now this is Baltic birch plywood, 3mm. It's going to be close to basswood plywood, but it's going to be a little more dense, and the layers are a little more thicker on this one. So it'll get you close. And so like if I was to just put down a simple shape here, you'll see that in the score setting, it's recommending a 50% power, 100mm per second single pass. We can jump down to engrave. It's going to drop down the power to 20. It's going to increase the speed to 250, still at one pass. And then down to cut, it's going to recommend 100% power, speed 15 in one pass. Now those may or may not work, but it's a way you can play around and try with it. But a way to be sure of what's going to work for your materials is we're actually going to use a material test array. And so this is one of the first things I recommend you do with any laser, but xTool makes it fairly easy here. So we're going to go again, once again, we're going to start with a rectangle, and I'm going to draw just a small rectangle here. Now, if you hold down Shift, you'll see that it stays kind of a perfect dimensions, both vertically and horizontally. So I'm just going to kind of draw a small shape here, and we're going to see that over here it is 6.28 by 6.28 millimeters. I'm just going to take that to an even 6 by 6, and that's going to be roughly a 1/4 inch shape. And we're going to start with a cut. So I'm going to move this to cut, and now with the shape selected here, we can actually come over here to our multi-tile applications, and we can come to material test array. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to bring up this window that will allow you to set some parameters. Now the nice thing is you can move this around so that you can actually see what it's building out over here. What this is going to do, it's going to create a grid of those objects that we created, so our 6 by 6 square, and it will do the operation that we had specified. So we said it was going to be a cut. If we want to do engrave, we would need to exit out of this, go back to our original square, hit engrave, and then start the material test array there, and then it would give us slightly different options. So what we want to do is make some changes here. Now when doing cutting operations, you're generally going to be in the upper percentage of your power. You're not really going to be cutting at 10%. That would be probably taking a lot longer than you need to. So what I'm going to do is under our power function over here, I'm going to take our minimum up to 50%, and that will kind of narrow down the array. So you see on the bottom here, it's 50, 63, 75, 88, and 100. Now we can increase the number of columns by 1, and now we get a nice 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So you can adjust those min-max settings and the number of columns to your liking to get a range of operations. Now, my experience shows me that a 40-watt diode laser with this material is going to cut somewhere probably between, I'm going to say 12 to 20, maybe a little above that. So as far as our speeds, we are going to not go as high as 300, but I'm going to top this out at 22. I'm going to start it at 12, and I'm going to adjust the rows to 10. We'll see what it does here. Actually, we're going to need 11, sorry. Now 11 takes us from 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 on up. Now you can run with this, or you could cut that in half and just jump every other one. So here I've got 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and 22. That's going to start dialing us into our cut operations. When we see the result of this one, we can say, okay, we had a lot of cutting at 12, but it really dropped off at 16. So then we could adjust our range to there. But let's start out with this. It's a nice size for our material. So once we're happy with that, and you can adjust the spacing if you want to shrink this down a little bit, you can. But when doing cut operations, I would leave it at least 2. 3 is kind of typical, but if you need to kind of squeeze it onto your material, you can do that. We'll hit OK, that'll lock that in place, and we can now drag this over and make sure it's positioned into our material. But we can still even increase it, so we know we're going to be using that width. Let's just go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. That's going to stretch everything out a little bit larger, but that's okay. So once we're happy with that, that already has all the settings in there. We've already done our distance. We know our marking. We're basically ready to send this over to the laser. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my exhaust fan. We'll hit go, and we'll check it out when it's done. All right, so I pulled this out of the laser, and let's see there on the front, 3 of them dropped out cleanly, but there are others that would probably just push out. So like if I push on them with my finger, you see they're popping right out. They're just being held in by a fine little piece or not. But so there we see that it barely cut through at 14 and cleanly at 12. So really the 13 at probably about 80-90% power would be our sweet spot. We could narrow this down a little bit. But before I go and change that too much, I want to show the importance of doing these material tests. So I have another variety of plywood. This is just a little bit over an 1/8 inch, but this is a birch veneer top, but it has a much softer core. I don't know that you can kind of see that there, that it's got a pretty thick middle core. And we're going to run that same test, those same speeds on this piece, and see how the cut quality as far as speed changes material to material. These are almost the same thickness. This one's just slightly a little bit thicker. But we're going to compare those results. So let me get this dropped in the laser, and we will run that really quick. All right, so here is the result of this one. You can kind of see it there. Getting a little higher power there, and on the back side you see on many more of them it was starting to poke through. And this is a thicker material, but it was actually performing a little bit better. So you can kind of get baselines here. I know if I was using just a pure basswood, not even plywood, we would be getting closer to those 20 millimeters a second. And if I was using a real dense, or even some of those construction grade plywoods that are thicker, it might not even get through at all. So you want to use other people's numbers with caution. Use this material test array, really dial in your settings on your material to know that it's going to work for you. It's a great tool built into XCS, and just get yourself some extra material whenever you're working on it, whenever possible. Run one of these. You can do it for both cutting and engraving, and it'll really help you dial in your settings. All right, so once you have your settings for cutting, it's also good to kind of run a similar test for engraving. So let's go through that really quick. Let's jump back into XCS. Now we're going to want to, I've moved my material, so we're going to need to kind of reset the working area. But let's go ahead and delete our array there. I just went ahead and highlighted and delete it. So again, we're going to start with a rectangle. I'm going to hold shift to make sure it's square. And I'll just come over here again, do 6 and 6. And we can come back and up here, we want to change our processing type to engrave. Now that should make this fill in as a solid shape within XCS. That's one way to recognize that it's set to engraving. So we have our object set up here. We're going to kind of ignore this. I mean, we could even switch it back to user defined, but we want to highlight our box. We want to come back to our material test array. And now you'll notice that instead of being outlined, they're all kind of filled. And so here again, we want to set our material settings a little bit different. Now here, we may want the full gamut from 10% on up to 100%. So on our power, I'm going to leave this 10 to 100, but I'm going to go with 11 columns, 10 columns to get our 10 to 100% power going for us. And but we're never really going to want to engrave at lower speeds. And you'll notice now that our maximum is also jumped up to 600. So with a 40 watt laser, I'm going to say we're probably going to be no less than 200 millimeters a second on up to 600. So we could simply start with this going 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not a bad area to start with. Again, you may need to run these a couple times because as you kind of narrow in there, you might want to say, okay, it looked good between 4 and 500. Let's actually run that full gamut. And maybe you're going to find that 450 is your sweet spot. But for this one, we are just going to start with the jumping up in 100 millimeters a second changes. So once we're happy with that, we're going to go ahead and leave our spacing at 3 and 3. We can hit OK, and that will bring it back out in our working area. Now we did move our material, so I'm going to need to go ahead and go back into our marking area and set that really quick. So let's go ahead and do that. You see here we have our engrave area. Now we've already used a section of that, so I'm going to actually show you where you might want to use the polygon and the shape it's going to go. So let's go back into our start marking area, and instead of rectangle, let's go ahead and hit polygon, hit start marking. Now I'm going to come back over to the laser here, and I am going to start in this position here. I want to be below the power, but we're going to come over to here. I'm going to hit the button. Now I'm going to come over to where I'm on the extent of the box there. I'm going to hit the button. Now I'll slide it up to the top here, hit the button. Then we'll come over to our upper right corner, hit the button to mark another area, bring it down to this corner, hit the button, and we will bring it back to this area, hit the button. And now if I hit end marking, I believe it should close it off. There you go. I'll go ahead and move the laser back up here. So now we have a rectangle that is excluding this area that's already marked, so I can go ahead and hit done. And now we know more precisely where we can mark. We know we don't want to use this area of our piece of material, so I'm just going to select this and drag it down to this bottom area here. Now you can see that we have our marking area. It's the same square, but we've excluded the pre-cut area. This is just our working area of the material that's left. So I've moved this down here, and we can go ahead and hit process. Now engraving processes take a lot longer, so you're going to see after it generates the preview, it's actually going to take about 18 minutes, whereas our cut file only took a little under 3. So again, we're going to go ahead and hit start. It'll send it to the laser, and here you see one of the first errors. Please close the lid before you start or continue the processing. This is one of the safety features of the xTool S1. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the lid. I'll hit confirm, and now it's just going to want us to redo this. We're going to say process again. Let's hit start, and now it's going to be ready. We can go over to the laser and hit the button. All right, so that job finished, and here you see it fitted on bottom nicely. And you can kind of see the results here, where at the bottom here at 200, when you get up into 100, you're getting a real deep engrave. As a matter of fact, if I tilt it this way, you might even be able to see the depth to it. Maybe not so much, but there is definitely a bit of depth here where all the way up here at the 600 millimeters a second, you're still getting a darker burn and all the way to super light. So there's multiple ways to interpret this. It really kind of comes down to what you're doing and what you're going for. Now, if you're trying to do a photorealistic engraving, you're going to be wanting to see that you have a full kind of spectrum from as dark as you need to as light as you need. So you may be able to get away with 600, but if you need a darker one, you might need to bump up there yet to the 400, as there is a little difference between the darkness in that one versus the 600. Or if you are just going for a solid color, you're doing a vector engrave, and you're saying, okay, I want it to be dark, but not too dark. You might pick something in the middle or maybe darker. You may need the depth. I mean, you can play around with that depth to be able to do like a real thin epoxy and fill type of thing. But this really comes up to what are you looking for? Are you looking for just a light marking and some speed? Are you looking for a dark color, some depth and such? So the other thing to look out for is you can probably see it a little bit better here on the 20, but you see this kind of grain section going down through there. It's kind of angling across. Those are things to look out for as well. That the grain of the wood, those kind of different densities of wood as it goes from a darker piece of grain to maybe a lighter piece of wood, or maybe you're getting from the heart into the sapwood, is going to change your effect as well. So it's very good to get used to this tool when playing around with your different material, and run some tests, kind of really get a good idea what it's going to do, both in different speeds on different material, but even if you have, different parts of the wood, might be a lighter section or a heavier grain section. So with these two, though, we should be able to, at least with this material, know if we need to cut it out, we can set our speed parameters, and if we need to engrave, we can definitely pick the tone that we want. As a matter of fact, we could do a multi-tone, so we might want a lighter engrave on part of our graphic and a darker as well. So what we're going to do now is we are going to take both our cut settings and our engrave settings for this specific material, and we are going to now set up kind of a more realistic project, something that we are going to do some engraving and cutting on, and we'll put it together in here. We'll use this to place our settings, and we'll end up with a project. So let's jump into that next. All right, we are back here in XCS. We've cleared out our workspace to start a new project. And what I think we'll do is just set up a simple keychain. This is something you can do completely within XCS. You don't need to import anything. We can use the tools at hand here. So what we are going to do first is we are going to come up to our object tool here, and we are going to actually select a circle. And I'm going to be making more of an oval shaped keyring. So we're just going to draw kind of our ellipse, and if we hold down shift, it's going to be a perfect circle. But if we just freeform it, it will stretch and skew both vertically and horizontally. So we're going to just kind of eyeball this. It's the that looks about right method that you probably hear about a lot. And we're just going to go with a shape. I don't want it too pointed on the ends, but something like that. Perfectly fine. That's all we're going for. Now, this will kind of set up our overall object, but we can start looking at our dimensions over here. Now, it defaults to millimeters, but if you want to, you can actually go into your settings. So you're going to come up here to your X in the upper left. You're going to go to settings, and you can actually change your units from millimeters to inches. And you'll see over here, it actually changed on the fly our dimensions of our object. So there we were going with 4.19 by 1.73. So, all right, so if you've changed it into inch or millimeters, however you want, imperial or metric, you've got your units. Now we can start using that to base our sizing of our object. So 4 inches for a keychain might be a little bit long, might be a little unwieldy. So what we can do is come over here and make some modifications. Now, if we want to keep our shape the same, if we don't want to skew it in both directions, we want to actually come over here and click this to where it says lock aspect ratio. And if we undo that, it is going to unlock the aspect ratio. So the icon is a little hard to tell. I think this is the way we want it. And so now if we change it from 4.19 to 3.5, nope, that wasn't right. So, okay. We're going to undo the button, take it back here. Now we want to, there we go. That apparently is locked. I can't, that's a weird icon. So let's try this again. Now we'll change our width to 3.5, and there you see it automatically scaled the height as well. So just look at this. You know, it would be nice if that changed from lock to unlock. It's saying the same thing, but I don't know what that is, kind of intertwining icon. Play with that and it won't skew it. That's really important if you have like text or more of an image. Here we're just kind of going by that looks about right. All right, so we've got our base keychain here, and now of course we're going to need a keychain hole. So I am going to hold shift and drag this out, and I want this to be about 1/8 of an inch, or which would be about 3 millimeters. So I'm going to go 0.125 and draw that down. Now, if you want, you can hold down Control and use your scroll wheel, and that will zoom in or out. It'll help you get things kind of aligned. Now, if I drag this into here, you'll notice that it starts giving us some of these reference lines, and these are really handy to use when trying to, if you wanted to drop it in the center, you could get both of those lined up. If you're just trying to align it horizontally or vertically, you can use those markings. Otherwise, you can also free form by just dragging around wherever, but I do want it kind of horizontally aligned, and don't want it too close. So again, we're going to use the that looks about right method. I click outside there, click into this one, and I'm going to bring it over a little bit. Now it is going to want to snap to items as you get closer, so just be mindful of that, and we'll put it right about there. That looks to be about 1/8 inch in and 1/8 inch diameter. So that will be our overall keychain hole. Okay, so we have these lined up. Now what I want to do is add some text in here. So we can come up to our text tool, and we can click in anywhere we want. That will bring up the default text of hello, and it gives us some options up here. So obviously we're going to want this to output, but we are actually going to do this as an engrave. So we're going to change that right away. The setting we'll worry about later, but what we want to do is play around maybe with the type of text. So we're going to come here, and we're going to go through the text. Now this should pull in any of your system fonts along with any that xTool adds. And I'm going to go for, let's just kind of look to see what we have in here. Okay, so let's play around with this Show Card Gothic. Now, bolder fonts are probably going to show up a little bit better in your engraving depending on your material. Finer lines are a little hit or miss. So, you know, play around with it. You may or may not be able to then also add the bold to it and such. But we're going to go ahead and play with this. So you can adjust the font size here by scaling it up and down, but you can also just scale it using your corner grab tools. So we'll drop this down here and bring it in. And there again, we're going to use our alignment tools to center it. And we would have that marked up pretty well. Now, we have our basic layout here, but we need to then now set our functions per item. So, all right, let's move our text out of the way. XCS is a little bit tricky when you have things layered on top of them, how they select them. So, you know, you got to play around with that a little bit. Sometimes you can, so like here, if I select this outer one, it won't let me select the inner one. If I click out of that, but then select this one, now I can interact outside of it. So it's a little finicky in its selection abilities. So just remember, if you're getting stuck, kind of click into a blank area and start over. You want to work from inside out. But we are going to select these two, and we are going to right click, and I want to move these to a cut layer. So I'm going to move those to black. Now you see we have our extra layers here. We got black and blue. This will allow us to actually help assign our order of operations as well. So now we can bring our name down, and again use our alignment tools to get it lined up in the center, both vertically and horizontally. And we like that. We don't want it any bigger than that. Now we are ready to set up our parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and just select our blue layer down here that will select both items there. And we're going to come to, since it's user defined, we're going to use easy set panel. Now we had our little grid here, our test array that we did, and I'm going to go with, we're going to go with 90% power, and we are going to go with a speed of, let's say 13, just to make sure we get through everything. Now this extra feature down here called lower the focus is an option you can turn on or off. By default, it's going to be off. You can turn it on, and what this does is, since the Z-axis is powered, you can actually tell it to lower down. Now that will allow the focus point, instead of being on the top of our material, we can try to move it to the middle point, which is going to effectively give us our efficient cut. So you generally would want to split the difference. This can't do fractional, so it's in millimeters. The smallest you can go is 1 millimeter at a time. So this being a little over 3, I'm going to drop it down just 1, and that will get us down just a little bit closer towards the middle. If it was 4 millimeter thick, then we would definitely go with 2. You want to try to aim for the middle, and that'll give you the best cut overall. So that's going to be the settings for the cut. And then we want to come down here, we're going to click on the blue, that's going to select the text. And now here we want to look at our grid again and decide what shade and what speed and power setting we're going to go for that. I do want it fairly dark, so I'm actually going to drop it down to, I think, 390%. So we're going to, once again, go up to 90%, and speed, you can either use your slider bar or we can just type in 300. Lines per centimeter is going to be kind of like your DPI. If you increase that, it's going to put more lines per distance in there, or so centimeter. So if you increase that number, it will take longer, but it will go over the material more or less. So you can play around with that number to see. It will take longer with the more lines per centimeter, but you may or may not get better detail, and is also a little darker as well. So, but here we are going to leave it at 100. But that is what our test was at, a single pass. And we'll be good to go with that. So with those all set, really, we just need to go ahead and put this material back in. We will put our marking area in so that we try to maximize the material in here again. And then we'll be able to send this job off to the lasers. All right, so that ran, and you see over here in XCS, it's showing time used was 1 minute, 3 seconds, so plenty fast. And here is the straight off the laser. You see we have the engraving there on top, nice and dark, nice and clean edges, and our whole everything dropped out. Now on the back, you'll see we got a little bit of flashback up here from the honeycomb. That's from it getting a little bit dirty, and those things will happen. And we do have just a little bit of residue that came up along the top. These are easy things to fix. I have just this little sanding block, this little foam sanding block, and I have like 220 grit sandpaper on here. We just take that and sand this real lightly. This won't get into the engraving, but it should just kind of clean up that top edge. You just do that a little bit on both sides. So I'll take this back part off as well. Just kind of clean up any of that flashback. This also helps to soften up your wood grain, smooth it out. So you're going to get a little sandpaper in here, or a little sawdust in there, but that definitely cleans it up here if I can get it that focused. But you can just take some canned air or an air compressor. That'll blast out any of that sawdust, that sanding residue. And I see over on our little lip here, the keychain, we have just a little bit. So I'm just going to sand that ever so lightly, blow it off. And there you have it. We have basic little keychain here. So, you know, you can buy your key rings here in bulk. You can get these, or you can get kind of the various styles of keychains, and drop that on there, and you have a keychain that you made in just a matter of minutes, both in design and cut. Obviously, you could throw a little bit of finish on here to keep it lasting a little bit longer, but real basic project that you can get started with. Doing both cutting and engraving operations with your xTool S1. Let's jump back into XCS here. We've cleared everything out. And right at the top here, we have our image option. Now, you can use the same one to bring in either vector images or raster images. So
we're going to go ahead and just grab something off my desktop. What do you know? Why don't we just grab this one? So say you got a friend of yours and you want to make yourself maybe a little memento or a miniature puppet or such. So we're going to take this fine gentleman here. Some of you may recognize him from the Clack Shack. We're going to go ahead and borrow his likeness because I don't think he'll get too mad at me at this. And we're going to play around with this. Now, obviously, this photo, there's some extra in there. So I just kind of want to focus on, you know, getting his face in there. So we're going to start with our edit image. And here we can play around with a few basic tools. Initially just being a crop. So I'm going to drag around the area that I'm primarily going to try to capture. So we're going to grab about this much. I'm going to drag that down a little bit. And we'll drag this up just a little bit as well. And we'll do that. That's going to kind of take away the bulk of it. Now, if we wanted to even further, we could play around with our eraser tool. And what this will do is just kind of block out various items. So you see the circle is our size. We can make that a lot bigger, or we can make that a lot smaller. If you wanted to, you could spend a lot of time and just dial in right on his head. So we're just going to get kind of close here. I'm holding down the mouse button, just kind of dragging it along, trying to get as close as we can. This is just erasing anything extra that we don't want. And so just keep kind of going around and getting as close as we can. Swipe down, grab that. And I'm going to be careful not to run over it, because otherwise you'll need to start over with this one. But we'll do that kind of as a first pass. And like I said, if you want, you could shrink this down quite a bit. And again, you can use your control key and zoom in. And we could even come in even closer and just kind of clean up some of these edges a little bit. So you want to do that to as close as you want to kind of crop out exactly what you're wanting to include. Now, you wouldn't have to do this. You could just go with a square photo, and that makes it nice and easy. You can just start working with the image. But in this case, for my application, I'm wanting to kind of just capture his head. And so we'll clean that up just a little bit. Okay, once we have that the way we want it, we can go ahead and hit save. That will bring it into our working area. And now you see we have a nice clack face head here. So now what we're going to want to do is scale it down to size a little bit, because I don't need his head to be that big. So we're going to shrink this down a bit. Now, another thing we can do, since I'm going to be wanting to cut this out, is we can actually use the outline tool, and that will give us the option to do a cutout. So you can go inside of it, you can go just to the outside of it, you can leave yourself a really nice gap on the outside. We want to be just to the outside, so I'm going to go with 0.04 inches, and we're going to hit OK. So that'll give us a cut line, but I'm going to go back into the image, and the other thing we need to do here is we're going to need to tweak this a little bit. You can make some adjustments to the photo, and this is purely experience talking, but I'm going to want to drop my grayscale down. What this is going to do is adjust. You kind of see we're getting you're eliminating some of the darks in that way, and this way you're going to be eliminating some of the lights. This kind of gives us a bit more, it's like playing with your contrast. So we want to get it to where we have a pretty good contrast, and then you can also play with your sharpness, and that will kind of help accentuate some of the differences between things. So I usually bump my sharpness up just a little bit. I bring my grayscale down probably about 185-ish, 187 is close enough. And we'll bump this up. We just want still some of those darks to show through, but not too many. Anyway, this is a little bit of trial and error. So once we kind of have that set where we have a pretty decent contrast on things, we can roll with that. Now, you can play around with their filters. They have different things to make the effect a little bit different. You have black and white, you have sketch, and this may come up with a look you're going for, maybe not. But we're going to go with this. Now, we do need to set up our settings for this. So I'm going to start with just the image. We're going to come here to Easy Set Panel, And this is where we want to use, again, our grid that we use. So it's a good idea to kind of keep these on hand, maybe make yourself a note with them. And on this one, I'm wanting to get find the spot where I'm getting dark enough things, but we're still getting light down here. So I don't want to go too slow. I think I'm going to go with 500 speed and about 75% power for our maximum. So we're going to bump this all the way up to 500 on our speed, and our power we're going to go to 75. And then bitmap mode, you can play around with this. Again, there are different ways of dithering the image. I'm going to stick with grayscale because XCS and the xTool lasers seem to do well. On some of my other lasers, I like to go with Atkinson or Stuckey. It's just how it kind of dithers and creates the pixels for it to work with. But grayscale can be tricky for some, but it seems to work well on this one. And we're going to do a single pass. Again, lines per centimeter would increase the resolution a bit. On something this small, we're just kind of making a small. It's going to be about 2.5 inches tall. So we're going to just stick with 100 centimeters. So once we have that, then we want to come to our outside line. Here again, we want to use our scale for cutting. We're going to jump our power up to about 90, and we're going to go with 14 millimeters a second. Actually, I think we did 13 last time. Let's stick with 13, and that'll be okay. So then this should engrave the image first and then do our cut. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll drop this in there, get it set up, and we'll send the burn to the laser. All right, so as you see here, this one finished in 3 minutes, 44 seconds, not bad. And here is our result. Now, because of that grain running through it, let's see if I can get it to focus on there. You got a little bit of a streak there, but we've got a decent representation on here. So when doing work with images, you definitely want to be mindful of the type of material going on. Anything that's fairly smooth and consistent surface is going to work best. So I find that your more closed grain woods, basswoods are very clear. Some aspens are very clear. Pine is going to be horrible. It's got, dense and dark veins going through it with the grain, as well as the really light wood. So choose your material accordingly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm going to take our popsicle stick. We're going to put it together with a little bit of glue, and I'll show you what I'll end up with. So I'm just going to take a little CA glue, put it on the end of this popsicle stick. This is a thicker glue, so it takes a little bit to come out. There we go. Got a nice little dollop on there. Take our handy CA accelerator, spray the back of that, and then we'll just push that right onto there. That CA accelerator will make a nice exothermic reaction with this, cause this CA glue to cure pretty quickly. Doesn't take too long at all. And now I've got a little Clack Shack head that we can use. So Clack, if you're watching this, don't get mad. We're just using you for demonstration purposes only. So anyway, images are something definitely you can work with this. If you're doing a lot with images, the 40 watt may not be as detailed as, say, the 10 or 20 watt, but this is on a smaller item, and I kept my lines per centimeter pretty low. Also, material choice is going to change and take into account for that. So we'll be doing some more engraving stuff with this machine in the future. So if you're curious about how that works out and the detail you can get with it, stay tuned. But the 40 watt is definitely a cutting powerhouse, and that's also something I'm going to be doing more testing with. So that was just a brief primer on engraving. And wasn't necessarily the best circumstances for getting high detail. It was just a really quick show how you can do it, how you set it up there. But just to show that this can actually do some high quality engraving. Here is some, this is actually called scratch acrylic. So it has a top layer of black, and then the middle layer is white. And so you burn away the black material off top. And so this is what it looks like when you spend a little time and get some high detail. Now this was done at 160 lines per centimeter. So again, that's giving us the higher detail, and in about 4 by 4 inches and pretty decent detail there. So just wanted to give an example of what can be done with this laser in engraving. Even though it's a 40 watt, it still has some fine detail. You can get some nice photorealistic engravings out of it. So let's jump ahead to one final thing that you may want to do with this laser. Being the 40 watt, it does have a little more power than your typical 10 or 20 watt module in here. And so the idea with that is that we can get into thicker materials. So I have a couple pieces of material we're going to try. So these are both poplar. They are a less dense wood. So I have this little chunk of about 1/2 inch poplar. And then if that works out well, we will step it up to 3/4. Now this is some ideal material. The grain is going to be working in our favor. It's not a very dense wood. So it should have a pretty decent chance at getting through this. So we are going to be setting up multiple passes, and we're going to be playing with that Z depth. We're going to bring it down to get more towards the middle. Really focus the point in the middle of the material so that we get as best of a cut as possible. So I'm going to get this 1/2 inch material in the laser, and then we will set up XCS to do some cut testing on here and see what happens. All right, so as you can see down in the lower left there, I do have the material kind of elevated on a couple of pieces of wood, so we'll be able to see if this drops through. So in XCS here, I've gone ahead and marked off our area. I've had it check the distance, and so I'm just going to start with this basic circle here. I'm going to move it up there, and this is just cutting in between those two pieces of wood. So what we want to do is we're going to come over here to our easy set panel. Now we are going to crank this to our 100% power, but we're going to take our speed back down to about 5, and I'm going to start with, we're going to go with 2 passes on this one. And then I'm also going to lower the focus. Now this is 1/2 inch material, which would be right around 12 millimeters thick. I don't know that we can drop it that far, but we are going to, yeah, we're gonna drop. We'll see here if we can drop it down. Let's go 5 millimeters. That'll get us partway through. Well, let's just see 6. We'll see about 6 millimeters. We'll see if that can get clear that material as well. And so we should also we've got auto air on, so it's going to have full air assist, and we'll see if it can do it in a couple of passes. So let me go ahead and send this off to the laser. This isn't going to be a long job at all, just going to be going a couple of laps around there. So let's hit start. Here it's going to give us a warning. High power and low speed may cause some flames, so we want to definitely keep that in mind, be keeping a close eye on this. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to process, and I forgot to shut the lid, so let's go ahead and do that. There we go. And we'll process again. Hit start, warning again, and now it is ready to go. So let's bring you up on the full screen and turn our air on. Let that wind up really quick, and then we will hit go. All right, so that did cut through. We've got our cutout here, so you can kind of see the edges. There's a little bit of charring to be expected, but fairly clean cut top and bottom. It did cut out at the kind of 1.5 passes, so there was obviously just a little bit of grain holding it in. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is see if we can speed this up a little bit. So I'm going to come back here into, XCS. And we're gonna take our circle, we'll just move it over a little bit. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the speed up to maybe 6 millimeters a second, and we'll run it again and just see if that allows it to pick up the speed, just so it just maybe eliminates the charring a little bit, but still drops through in 2. All right, so that one came through cleanly, and it actually dropped right at the end of the cut, so that seemed to be our ideal. Here again is the cutout, so you can kind of see that it is caramelized, but not real charred. Here is the other part, so this one is the first one we cut, and you see there's a lot of flashback. This is actually the second one. So both top and bottom are fairly clean. So in 1/2 inch poplar, we were able to run at 6 millimeters a second, 100% power, 2 passes, and had that Z-axis lowered down about 6 millimeter. And it cut out fairly cleanly and fairly well. So, you know, that's pretty decent for this 1/2 inch or about 12 millimeter material. And to get a fairly clean cut without really getting a lot of charring and slowing it down too much. So now let's set up the 3/4 material. I got that here. We're going to put that basically in the same spot. We're probably going to need to up it to 3 passes. And we will leave the depth the same because I'm a little concerned that it's going to get too close to the surface. So we're going to give this a shot, see how it runs. So let me get that set up into the laser. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move our circle back over to the side because we may need to run multiple tests. I'm going to come back into our Easy Set panel, and I'm just simply going to increase this to 3 passes because we are adding another 1/4 inch of material. I'm going to leave that depth down at 6 millimeters. I'm not sure we can go much lower, maybe just a little bit. So we're going to run this test the same as last one, just adding that extra pass. So let's go ahead and send this off to the laser. It's looking good. We're going to get that warning again because of high power, low speed. We're all ready to go. So let's fire up the fan again and go. At this, we were able to get through 3/4 inch aspen, and in 3 passes, full air, 100% power, 6 millimeters a second. So that's about 18 millimeter material. As a matter of fact, let me just go ahead and check that measurement on here. So we're going to go ahead and take our calipers on here, and it's actually coming in at 19 millimeters, if you can see that there. So just over 18 millimeters, 3/4 inch material. So it is possible. However, if you're getting very big and you're having to do 3 passes, it is going to take some time. And so, you know, as you have some of these little charred edges on there, that's also going to add some cleanup. So if you really have to, 3/4 inch is possible. I think 1/2 inch is definitely doable, looking at how clean that is. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this to maybe be able to cut some thicker items. And know that denser material is not going to have as much luck. If I drop some oak in here, I know it's going to struggle a lot more. It's going to add more charring, and it might not get through at that 3/4 inch. But sticking with the less dense, lighter weight wood, still definitely a possibility. Anyway, I think this video is probably already getting kind of long, so I'm going to cut it short here. And but I wanted to approach this one more of getting started with the xTool S1. I get a lot of people who ask questions on my videos of maybe how I do things, how I get started, how do I interpret these material tests. And so I thought we'd approach this video in a getting started with your S1 in case you are brand new to lasers or maybe brand new to the xTool ecosystem, wanting to figure out XCS a little bit. So hopefully this primer was good for you. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down below, reach out to me. Happy to help if I can. And I'll be doing more content with the S1 as well as other lasers along here. As you probably noticed, I have the xTool F1 next to this xTool P2, and they are all enclosed lasers. They have more of those safety features with them, and so that makes it easier to use them in the shop and keep myself and others safe. And so that's one of the big things I really like about this laser. Of course, there are many other videos that I have on my channel. If you want to know more about the xTool D1, I've got some videos that I've done over the past couple of years on both the 10 and 20 watt there. So anyway, I hope this has helped you out and can help you get started lasering with the xTool S1. So once again, thank you for checking out this channel. I hope you found it informative. I will have links down below to this laser and many of the other things I use in the workshop. Many of them will be affiliate links, and they do provide a small kickback to me at no additional cost to you, but it's just a great way to support the channel and help me continue to do what I do here in providing content around lasers, which hopefully will give you some inspiration and education on using them in your workshop as well. Always appreciate a like and a follow, and if I've earned it, definitely hit that subscribe button. Once again, if you have any questions, do leave them down below, and I do try to get back to those as quickly as I can. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I thank you for watching, and if you've hung in this long, you are a real trooper. I appreciate you. So we'll be back again with more to work with the S1 and other lasers. But in the meantime, I hope you can get out into your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.